Okay, I'm assuming everybody can see this. All right, so I've been asked to talk a little bit about the business case of Curaçao Heritage Fund and our experiences and lessons learned. And I will communicate as well towards the end of this presentation a little bit some opportunities for improvement going forward. So first of all, we obviously went through an entire process of evaluating whether listing on the DCSX would be a sound business case. And I think in that process, we considered the following factors, of the amount of liquidity that's in the market with pension funds and insurance companies and other financial institutions. An interesting part that a lot of us already know is that most of the pension and insurance assets have a requirement of investing 60% of this liquidity into the local market. And after 2007, we had a situation where a lot of the government bonds from the government of Curacao and the Netherlands Antilles, the former Netherlands Antilles, were basically paid off by the Netherlands. So there was a lot of liquidity flowing back into, these pension funds, and that obviously had to be invested in local opportunities. So these investable assets at one point in time, I estimated totaled over $5 billion that are with pension funds and insurance companies in the Dutch Caribbean, of which 60% again had to be invested in local opportunities. But obviously, in such a small scale economy like ours, we also saw that there were very few local investment opportunities for this amount of liquidity. So what we also understood from our process of assessing is that institutional investors, because they were so accustomed to these government bonds in the past, were more inclined from a risk point of view as well to stay with the fixed income type securities for investment purposes. And I think also simply there was less of a equity market developed because of this in our local markets for that purpose. I mean, it was clear that after 2010, with also some activity picking up with the DCSX, that new local opportunities had to develop and structured so that they could fit the needs of the growing investment appetite, local investment appetite of the pension funds and insurance companies. So I think we were one of the first ones with the issuance of the bonds for Building Depot in 2016 to list a local private company's fixed income securities on the DCSX. You could see that. I won't go too much into this because that's the topic of my next speaker, which is Mrs. Justice Martins, who will talk more about this very eventful time in the exchange is history, and of course our local financial market. So in short, what we also considered is something that has been mentioned very recently also in the Groeistrategie, a government document that was signed between the government of Netherlands and Curaçao about how to make the financial markets work properly. I think this statement kind of sums it up, and also what Errol said earlier, a well-functioning capital market makes it easier for capital to flow to profitable investments. And from this point of view, the government of the Netherlands also offered the help of their outfits, but also the help of the Euronext in Amsterdam to help the DCSX locally build a more solid financial market along with the central bank of Curaçao and Sint Maarten. Also, what we liked a lot about the possibility of listing on the DCSX was, a stock market listing also has other benefits and ensures compliance, with tax payments, transparency, a topic that Errol also spoke about, things that we are not usually accustomed to because we always have a two-way relationship with our bank, and our bank obviously keeps everything secret. But transparency would be a very welcome change in our entire financial ecosystem. Also, this listing on the local exchanges would help, creating companies with better corporate governance structures, and make this institutionalized, and therefore create much more ability for value creation in these companies going forward. And to that last point, obviously, CFG, Curaçao Financial Group, we've always believed that a environment where there are more valuable companies, by definition, also creates more value for the community. So to jump into our specific case, the Curaçao Heritage Fund, we sought from the time in 2013, soon after we started Curaçao Financial Group, to set up an investment fund for the local pension funds and insurance companies to invest in. But unfortunately, that did not go through back then in 2013. But a few years afterwards, we had a very unique opportunity that came to our attention, which was the whole Pietermaai small area in the inner city of Willemstad, where, in the year 2000, the entire neighborhood was very run down, as you can see from some of the pictures here. It was a neighborhood that was developed by a small group of private investors that bought up a lot of these, let's say, dilapidated monuments, and with subsidies from the Monument Fund here in Curaçao, and obviously a lot of help from other financial institutions and other partners, were able to, revive an entire neighborhood and make it into a vibrant, let's say, Soho of Willemstad, with boutique hotels, student accommodations, commercial office spaces, shops, restaurants, bars, clubs. I think everybody that's from Curaçao in this webinar knows Pietermaai very well now as a hip and trendy place to go out to. But in 2017, the let's say principals of Jewel Investment, Jan Peltenberg, Anne-Marieke Holten, and Wilfred Hendriksen, decided to sell all of these restored properties that were running very well with their different functions as one bulk. And that was obviously a good timing for us to pick out our investment fund structure, real estate investment fund structure that we'd put in let's say the refrigerator for a few years, and dust it off and see what we could potentially do with this concept, in Pietermaai. And I should say that Jan Peltenberg was extremely excited about the opportunity of consolidating all that he and his partners had built in Pietermaai Small in one real estate fund that would be available to investors, a broad base of investors in Curaçao and the local market, to also participate in this unique, creation and development that took place in Pietermaai. So from that point of view, we were able to get into the negotiations around July of 2017. And by the time we had reached an agreement on the price and the process of how, this would go about with setting up a real estate investment fund, we were at about November 2017 when we signed that sale purchase agreement of these properties. So if you can see on the picture, all the, let's say, the properties that are colored red, most of these properties were being considered at that time to be consolidated into the real estate investment fund. So what we did, we obviously went and started off our due diligence process, and in that process, we had some lucky moments. We discovered that there was just a very recent tax incentive introduced in the market where investing in UNESCO World Heritage properties had no zero transfer taxes due when buying properties. Uh, there were also no mortgage stamp duties due when borrowing against these properties. Equity partners that invested would enjoy a 30% tax deduction of the value of the investment that they could take against their company profit taxes, or also in their own personal income tax as well. And what was extremely interesting also were any interest that is earned on loans that are granted to monument properties and UNESCO World Heritage properties were exempted from taxes on the interest income. So that made it obviously very exciting to issue these bonds, as the interest earned on these bonds would be completely exempted from tax. Furthermore, the entity we used for the real estate investment fund was structured as a transparent company. And in a transparent company, there are 0% profit taxes due. All of the tax burden falls in the space of the investors directly. So once we were into this process, I don't know if you recall, we started this process in November 2017. Unfortunately, shortly thereafter, in February 2018, Mr. Peltenberg passes away because of complications with cancer, and so that was unfortunate. We were very happy that his other partners wanted to continue with the process, as we were well into the process for the transfer of the properties at that point in time. So then the entire, let's say, regulatory part came into play with our prospectus having been sent to the Central Bank of Curaçao and St. Martin, and also the DCSX for approval to list on the stock exchange. These approvals followed each other very quickly. In March, we got the approval from the central bank, let's say the waiver, to be able to raise capital from the local markets. However, the minimum investment that the central bank required was 50,000 guilders for the bonds. So that was something that we had to take into account and complete our prospectus, which was then reviewed by the DCSX and was approved in April of 2018. I think it was the 4th of April of 2018 for a listing on the exchange. Very soon after that, on the 12th of April, we distributed the prospectus of the Curaçao Heritage Fund to a broad base of institutional and private investors. And we were seeking to raise about $4.2 million in bonds. And I think we were very successful in achieving that. By May, literally 3 weeks afterwards, we had more than enough subscriptions and registrations from a total of 22 investors in the fund. So then we were able to close the transaction very quickly thereafter. By the end of May, we were able to pass the notary deed. And, as you can see from the pictures, we were able to celebrate that the week after in June, the successful transfer of almost 11 million guilders worth of properties into the real estate fund, of which the bonds were listed on the DCSX. So to go about briefly the process we went through, we obviously, in the preparedness stage, we did our due diligence. We analyzed all of these different factors that you see listed here for preparing a proper prospectus. And that prospectus obviously is a very key piece of document that we were able to then share it with all of the major stakeholders, in this case the DCSX, but also, of course, this Central Bank of Curaçao and St. Martin. We also had to conduct a roadshow with brokers, to see if there would be sufficient appetite for them to distribute this prospectus to their investors, which they were, thank God, which also obviously helped us a lot in achieving the oversubscription with the investors. We also did separate roadshows for the investors directly in presentations that were organized together with the brokers. And then obviously we had to go through some of the processes with the central bank's custodian. In this case, that's Finanova. And obviously sign agreements with our paying agent and our bond agent, who would act as a, let's say, a caretaker on behalf of bondholders to see whether we, as the issuer, the Curaçao Heritage Fund, would comply with all of the agreements that were set forth in the bond agreement. To give you an idea of the timelines, the preparedness took us about a month and a half. We had the prospectus done by the end of the second month. And the approvals from the DCSX and the central bank followed in the month 4. Month 4 and 5 were used for roadshows, and then we were able to achieve a financial close in the 7th month. So in our, since there were very few other examples done in the local market, I think this was fair to say that we were very happy with this timeline of achieving the necessary funds of launching this fund. So, okay, then I would want to go briefly from our experience, obviously, what we think would be the ideal ideal factors for a successful listing on an exchange, and not only on a DCSX, but any kind of exchange. I believe there needs to be a level of scale that you can count on, not only as an issuer to grow your market, but a certain scale also in the DCSX and its ecosystem of brokers, investors, and regulatory body. Like I mentioned before, good growth prospects, a company or an issuer that's considering a listing. I would recommend, especially from experience, that there be a long track record of audited financial statements. A good corporate governance. We now have over 2.5 years of experience with our board of supervisory directors at the Heritage Fund, and I can say that it's been a very, very fruitful experience to be able to bounce ideas off of your board of supervisory directors and the different insights that you get as management of the fund. This is very, very invaluable, and it also, of course, serves as an additional check. Also, what I would recommend very highly is what the Jamaica Stock Exchange does with their junior stock exchange. They actually have sort of a pre-listing period of almost 2 or 3 years that a company has to go through before they can actually be listed on the main stock exchange. I think this is very, very important for companies looking to list, because it prepares you on what it is to be a publicly listed company. So yeah, moving from I think our local market perspective, what René also correctly indicated earlier, we're coming from a situation where we're more accustomed to just walk to our bankers and find the best financing solution for our ideas, our companies, our projects. And so there you can see that a bank generally looks at these 3 factors as their most important factors. But once you are looking at whether you want to invest in a company as an equity investor or even as a bond holder, you're going to focus on other aspects of this company. And there you see that the corporate governance, the sufficient level of capital and reliable financials come more into play. And then considering what I spoke of earlier, the definition of a valuable company and what scale and growth opportunities represent for something of this for a valuable company. These are other factors that I think you would consider when listing on a much larger stock exchange, and if you want to have that to become a successful listing. So yeah, I think driving the development, what we're seeing now, this would be the ideal movement with the red arrow towards people changing their mindset of being a bankable company to a valuable company, and therefore a more listable company as well. So going through some of the lessons learned for us with the Curaçao Heritage Fund, we came across a number of interesting facts that it's always nice to share with people. In hindsight, again, is always 2020. So from this point of view, I would say that from our opinion, there are a very limited number of companies in the Caribbean, or the Dutch Caribbean for that matter, that can go public in on this exchange. Obviously scale plays a very important role here. But what is interesting about the DCSX is that it's an international bourse already, and it's open to many international players over the last few years. We've had Chinese listings, Colombian funds have listed on the DCSX, and several others that are currently considering a listing. So there is opportunity there for DCSX to be a vibrant market, not only for local companies, but also for regional and international companies. What we found is that there is still work to be done on the level of knowledge and commitment from the important stakeholders in our market. We've conducted a number of these meetings and presentations and workshops, and we've also had the very good knowledge sharing with the Jamaica Stock Exchange. And there are clearly a lot of things that need to improve, with our local ecosystem of a financial market before we can get to a level of as Errol mentioned, a vibrant financial market. One of the other impediments that we came across was the minimum investment of 50,000 guilders. I think this amount is too large for most of the investors that are willing to step into a financial market locally. So that's definitely something that should be modified. From what I hear from DCSX representatives, that this is indeed something that's currently being worked on, and hopefully it will be solved very soon. What we also did come across is that we have a very strong and deep knowledge of the logistics around a exchange, and that has a lot to do with our heritage of the trust sector in Curaçao. So things like investor relations, stack structuring, custody services, fund accounting. These are all aspects that are pretty well organized already, in my opinion, in Curaçao, which forms a very solid basis for further developing a financial market. This is something that some of the other islands cannot really say for themselves. Furthermore, what we saw as well in our process is that there is a lot of appetite from local investors. Not only because they want to be part of the financial market, but they want to be part of investment that has a positive impact on their environment and their society. Did we achieve our objectives as Curaçao Heritage Fund and CFG? I think we did. If you look at the pie charts I put up over here for you to see, on the left, you'll see of the total amount that was raised from issuing bonds through the DCSX, 53% of the dollar value, so to speak, was from private investors, and less than half was from institutional investors. And the pie chart on the right of your screen, you will see that in terms of numbers, you'll see that we have almost 11 of the total of 17 bondholders were private investors, and even there, the minority are actually the institutional players in the market, the smaller pension funds, a local bank, and an insurance company. So going into, I think, the concluding slides here, like I said earlier, I think there are great opportunities to be had here in making our financial markets a vibrant place of exchange. You know, we can certainly team up with other exchanges that are more than willing to offer help in creating a more vibrant trading space for us here in Curaçao. Again, you know, we've been offered on many occasions the CEO of Jamaica Stock Exchange, her help in, you know, designing specific tax incentives, helping build a more robust regulatory environment, and obviously conducting more educational related workshops where, for example, students are encouraged to join a stock market competition, and thereby learning what it is and how it is that they should be investing through the exchange. Point four, you know, something that is currently as well under consideration with all of the new developments in Curaçao. Are we going to continue with our local currency as the currency? I personally think that the US dollar as a currency for the exchange would be a very welcome development, even especially if you want to attract international investors to your exchange. Also, what's playing a big role now is guarantee instruments that the Netherlands will be make available for our economic sector in Curaçao. I think we should use these guarantee instruments that will make it a lot easier and a lot less risk-averse investors to get into the play as well, with the guarantee instruments being employed, sorry, for these investments. And of course, what I said earlier, reducing the minimum investment to about 1,000 guilders, or I should say $1,000, since I believe that the currency of the exchange should be in dollars. So I've taken it upon myself to set up a little bit of an action list. You know, this is my opinion, obviously, what should happen. More than happy to share this and discuss ideas about these steps. But I think we now, as the most important stakeholders, have to name a stock market czar, somebody that is going to have as their primary responsibility the development of the financial markets locally. I think the central bank should start by introducing a dedicated regulatory team that will be only in charge with DCSX matters, financial markets. You know, since the central bank did not establish a regulatory authority because it's such a small market, I think there should be a dedicated department within the central bank that is only focused on the DCSX. We should also work on improving tax incentives for companies that are looking to list on the DCSX. More stock market education at our universities. Start off with the simple stock market challenge. We've indicated that we'd be more than happy to partake in these and offer prize money to winning parties to make it even more exciting, that the youth of our local community get involved in this. Eliminate the local currency, also eliminate other obstacles for the free flow of capital, like license fees that to my opinion are not really helping the process of creating a vibrant financial market. And you know, something that was mentioned earlier by Rene, I don't know if the blessing of Mayo is enough, but I think you need to move forward and oblige all government-owned entities to be listed on the stock exchange and to comply with all of the listing requirements of the stock exchange. That gives obviously a lot more transparency what's going on in these government-owned entities that are owned by us as citizens of the country. Obviously, what I mentioned earlier, form alliances with other exchanges that are more than willing to help, and obviously improve our ecosystem, increase the number of active brokers, market makers, and maybe even get the commercial banks to be more involved in the financial market of Curaçao. And with that, obviously, you know, the last point, I think what I mentioned with respect to our new entity that's going to be set up here in Curacao, and the IDB that helped Jamaica with building capacity for a financial market. I think we should tap into these sources as well to help us propel the DCSX to a vibrant and productive and successful stock exchange. So that was my presentation. Again, I'm more than happy to answer questions from any participants directly on my phone number. You can WhatsApp me on that number, or you can email us at CFG Value email address, and we'll be more than happy to share more thoughts with that. Thank you.